Cure-ncy, the Internet Framework for the Eradication of Disease. What we propose is the creation of a centralized, finite, virtual currency which acts as the consideration which would be embedded in the terms of service of a social network, which same social network would be then used to not only be able to capture a qualitative measurement of a subject or volunteer, let's call it volunteer bioinformatic data, including how they felt, environmental influences, and other information that they would give in return for that activity, which was originally a patent that Dr. Kevin Buckman and I wrote, dealt with a method and process of tabulating points to social networking activity, and we'll reference where you can find that on the social network. It was a patent that we wrote in 2010. It went provisional, and we just, with open source, you just keep on inventing. So it's part of our open source library. It's welcome to the community as everything else is. Let's take what we've created and let's see what we can do with it. So it gets down to this concept that we figured out that we could wind up measuring people's bioinformatic data using a breath test. So Dr. Kevin Buckman, who's just one of the most brilliant people you'll ever have the opportunity of meeting, he creates a technology dealing with the ability of detecting oxidative stress, cortisol levels, intercellular acidosis in a way that it can be captured through a technology of a really interesting guy who's got an amazing background, who's figured out this technology that he licensed off NASA, and it's like where peanut butter meets chocolate. And this peanut butter that meets chocolate has already been demonstrated by Google, who, in the last couple of months has announced they're coming out with a smart contact lens, where that smart contact lens is now going to be measuring your bioinformatics. So for glaucoma or macular degeneration or intercellular glucose levels, or all the stuff that they're billing it out as, we're going to help glaucoma and diabetic neuropathy, or macular degeneration. When really what it is it's a very sophisticated mechanism to capture one's bioinformatics. So with all these new peripherals that are being created, where we have Moore's law basically reinventing itself every 18 months, doubling, while technological or biotech innovation is nowhere near that pace, you start to see where this is all happening and where this all can converge. And the one area that we see this all converging is the need for this framework, which we call today Cure-ncy. People that would understand Cure-ncy would see this as the Bitcoin of research, the Bitcoin of cancer research, the Bitcoin of diabetic research, the Bitcoin that allows for the greatest collection of bioinformatic data. As the technology in the peripheral market expands and the ability of being able to interface with smartphone technology and being able to capture intercellular acidosis levels, oxidative stress, hormone levels, cortisol, perspiration, the environment, the air quality that you are experiencing, the outside influences, and being able to have that data set following you and basically contributing to the largest dynamic body of information ever. And the only way that you can explain that is look at the SETI project, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The concept where they have all these radio telescopes sitting in the desert. And in the desert they sit and they look for radio transmissions coming in. And the whole basis of these radio transmissions is to see if there's patterns. They can find a discernible pattern to show that there's intelligent life. So they're looking for the needle in the haystack. And these big radio telescopes that are out there are collecting trillions and trillions of data sets of noise and random patterns of noise picked up by different spectrums of these radio microscopes. And what SETI did was they were one of the pioneers in a concept known as distributed computing. And distributed computing was a way of allowing computers to work in parallel. And through distributed computing, you could wind up tapping into hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of computers and harness that processing power. So what SETI did is they took all of this noise and they create packets of it and they send it to these computers to do all the processing, and then the computers come back with the processed package on that data set, and now SETI can use it into other programs. So what it does is it really is the concept of the internet. It's being able to tap into the resources as a two-way street. Today, you know, with the internet, everyone has the assumption that the internet is free and everything on the internet is free, but the relationship that really should exist, the two-way relationship, is that my computer's downtime is the internet's downtime. Like it's for the internet's use. And that's really the whole concept of what SETI was out. So they created a plugin, people would download the plugin, and through that plugin you have thousands of volunteers lending their computers to process this information with the hopes of discovering something. And what is that discovery? That discovery is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That's the project. So let's take what SETI did with distributed computing and apply it to the world of bioinformatics. Bioinformatics is going to be the ethical dilemma of the 21st century. It's going to be the greatest discoveries, the greatest understanding is going to come from the secrets that are unlocked when we master the keys to bioinformatics. Cure-ncy is here as its guiding principle, knowing that this exists, that the framework needs to have that ethics, that ethos, weaved into the very core of what Cure-ncy is. And what is Cure-ncy? Cure-ncy is the internet framework for the eradication of disease by the following methods. When we set this project out, we initially created a social network which took us 8 years to build, which is known as cancer.im. And cancer.im is our idea that we can index more than just information, that we can index people's experiences. We can index who their wisdom. So let's look at this as like a pyramid. And on the base of the pyramid, you have information. And in that information, what you wind up happening is you have Google. Google's indexed all this information. They've come in and they've done the Dewey Decimal System for the internet. I mean, that's really what they are. They're the librarians of the internet. But if you look at the hierarchy of a pyramid, you have at the base information. In the middle, you would have knowledge. And at the apex, top of it, you would have experiences. So you see this, you know, best practices industry, knowledge management emerge. And what is knowledge management? Knowledge management is knowledge transfer. How do I know what my company knows? That's the question is, if we just knew this, we would be great. So, it created the proverb that, everyone is a genius in hindsight. And you look at that and you say, well, why is that? Why is everyone only a genius in hindsight? What if we could take the same infrastructure, the same framework that's linear in nature, but through the expanding internet, through the infrastructure, through computers, Moore's law, the bandwidth, everything just took off, and then you had the wild variables of like Wi-Fi, just like who would have thought of Wi-Fi, right? So you have those interjected into this situation, and what winds up happening is we have an amazing opportunity. And this amazing opportunity is we have the ability of, as a community, everyone signing in to some type of a social network that we developed the framework for. That's the Veritech core, the heart of this technology, is we've created the big Lego piece, the one that everyone can plug into. And what that does is it does a few things. One, it has a situation which we call the map. And what we do is we've taken cancer as our first shot. And with cancer, we created a thing called Cancer.im. And with Cancer.im, we saw a study in 2007 that said that if you could raise a cancer patient's quality of life, you could directly lower the incidence of morbidity regardless of treatment. Regardless of treatment. So you look at this in an evidence-based medicine setting. The American Medical Association, the definition of quackery is making a claim without direct evidence-based medicine. That is a framework. That is, if you look at the language that is afforded in the word quackery and how the AMA uses that as a weapon to protect their fiefdom, let's call it what it is. What they wind up doing is they use evidence-based medicine, and they put a little too much zeal in the control factor and not allowing it to be open source. And from that, they really need to be chastised for it. And not just the AMA, but all the bureaucracies. I'm not a doctor. I lost my dad to cancer. I owned a military intelligence company when my dad was sick. I've taken companies public. I've restructured biotech companies. I've been to FDA meetings. I've dealt with the investment bankers on getting drugs from phase 1 through phase 2 through Orphan Drug Act, phase 3. Been there, done it, as a client, writing the checks to the big law firms. So I've seen the inner workings of the bureaucracy, and I've seen the condescending nature that it is producing in the scientific community, and I see the rift that it has created between complementary alternative medicine and this Western protocol of chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, pretending that they have all the answers when they don't even know the questions. And they're using this environment to lock people out. And the victim here is the cancer patient. And that's where I cry foul. And that's where people will look at, why I did what I did is you see it. I have yet to find a person who has lost someone they care about or loved, or someone close to them that died of cancer, and you saw them wither away, and you start thinking, could there have been something there for them? I heard that there was something there in Mexico, or the B-17, or Ted Brzezinski, or all these things. And if you really start peeling back all this stuff, It comes down to there's a war. There's the one that Nixon wrote in 1971, which created the National Cancer Act. There's another one, and that's between complementary alternative medicine and Western protocol. And what is the driving factor behind that? Money. I wrote a paper on this that was its kissing cousin, titled Dying to Make a Profit. And Dying to Make a Profit got into the accounting irregularity of a for-profit, publicly traded health insurance company. So let's look at this. You have mutual insurance companies and you have publicly traded insurance companies, or non-mutual. So there's statistics, and it says quality of life, and this is what drove the paper. What people had a higher quality of life with different insurance companies. And the ones that showed a higher quality of life came from mutually owned insurance companies. Mutually owned means that they're owned by the insured. Like, that makes sense. And the ones that didn't were the biggest publicly traded health insurance companies, and the ones that were on the bottom, conversely, were the most profitable of the health insurance companies. So I looked at this and I said, financial engineer, kick in. Let's play some fun. So I hired some CPAs and we looked at the financial statements of the top 12 health insurance companies, publicly traded. Scoured them, looked at everything, looked at the footnotes, looked at the internal controls, looked at anything that they had going on with the SEC, any comments, anything. We were doing FOIA requests, anything that didn't have a CT on it, confidential treatment, fair game. Yeah, we sent out FOIA requests, right? That was fun. Getting redacted stuff from hospitals, right? So we start looking at this, and one thing becomes the 800-pound gorilla that no one's talking about. So, I mean, we're thinking that we're going to find it in this FOIA request, and where we find it, it's staring us right in the face. And here's the problem. Publicly traded health insurance companies do not have anywhere in their financial statements reference to the accounting liability which is created through a conflict of interest that is generated through their business activity. And you say to yourself, what are you talking about? And it's simple. An insurance company has a duty of care to their policyholder. The policyholder pays them a premium, and through that premium, a relationship is created. In the legal context, that is what's known as a fiduciary duty of care. That is what's fiduciary duty of care via contractual arrangement. Conversely, a publicly traded company has a fiduciary duty of care to its shareholders. It is there to create shareholder value. It is in their board's interest, and they can be sued if they do not work in the best interest of the corporation, meaning that you just can't be there being like, yeah, we're just a happy-go-lucky publicly traded corporation. Although background is being tested right now with what's known as the B corporations, which are a very interesting hybrid. These are corporations that are for-profit but with a cause that trumps the director's decisions to give them a safe harbor from being sued in the concept of violating the fiduciary duty of care of the shareholders according to a mission statement. So don't be confused that because a health insurance company's got really cute commercials of a cute family and they got cute teeth and a cute dog, that they have anything but your interests not at heart. Their interests are aligned with Wall Street and how the laws are written. Their feet are really on the fire, and most importantly, the officers and directors can be sued if they neglect that. So although they might have like, well, we don't deny claims, We just make it sound like we do, right? When on Wall Street, it's like, you deny this claim or we're going to lose money. And you think that might be extreme. I say it with parody, but now I can back it up with fact. And the fact is this: the Supreme Court in 2002 ruled on a case that said, you have an insurance company, you have this conflict of interest, and this creates a huge liability. So the liability's been known. I mean, there's legal precedents pointing to the quantification of a liability. Like, this is not like something that, you made up. Like, the Supreme Court has ruled and has developed case law that establishes as judicial fact. So now we look at ourselves and you say to a publicly traded health insurance company, you're representing the policyholders and you're representing the shareholders, but our interests are completely the opposite. My interest is that I want to make sure that I have the best care, and you, as the shareholder, want to make sure that it's the most profitable. Something has to give there. It's a finite take. There's no gain here. It's a zero-sum game. So you start looking at this, and this is where we started seeing that technology with social network growth. This is like the early days of MySpace. Facebook was just like starting to get traction. And we started looking at the different UIs and the interactivity, and we looked at this as like, oh, this is like the new AOL. You had AOL was like the internet, and then the internet happened, and then AOL wasn't so much the internet anymore, right? Well, like Facebook and all these other social networks are like what AOL was hoping to accomplish before the genie blew out of the bottle. So you get down to that all these social networks really have interesting user interfaces. And what's a user interface? A social network is nothing more than this. A social network or a mobile network or anything it's a visual database with a user experience. They're pushing or pulling data. They're giving you something from that push-pull data, and that's what it is. So it's a transaction. So you ask yourself, so what we did is we saw with Cure-ncy this health insurance issue, and it really started chapping us. So at the same time, we find a study that comes out that says if you can raise the quality of life of a cancer patient, you can directly lower the incidence of morbidity regardless of treatment. And you looked at it and you said, wait, they're quantifying the qualitative. That's really unusual. So we started studying the EORTC, European Organization for the Research and Treatment of Cancer. They are in Belgium, and their index that was used in this evidence-based study that I cite was known as the QLQ30 questionnaire. So they ask once a week these cancer patients a questionnaire that they answer 1 through 10, and through compilation of these statistical numbers, they come out with a baseline score. And from that baseline score, patients that had a higher score did less dying. That's what it came down to. But how it was quantified was, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. It had all the things that we needed to have, and it's the Rosetta Stone that allows this war to end. This war between the complementary alternative medicine and the Western protocol. Now this study, this Rosetta Stone says, look, guys, we need to be thinking together. We're all part of the equation. Let's look at the technology that we have at our fingertips, and like the second Renaissance, let's look at this as a way of asking the questions that we all can participate. We can all share in that we all focused on this to make this happen. So, it's removing, that civic cycle, the 40-year swing that I love when Michael Drew, a good friend, did it with this pendulum series where he explains this 40-year rift. And, you look at it that we're getting out of the the me generation, the I generation, into the we generation once again. And what's really important about this is we're doing it at the right time with the right technologies that can shepherd it. This needs to be open sourced. So, and we wrote a paper on that, the potential of open source biotech, and that's a whole another presentation. But it gets down to, we created this index. We created a 15 best modular adaptation of how social networking could be leveraged to help a cancer patient raise their quality of life from questions and other research we did, and just common sense on how we could leverage social network to lower anxiety. Part of the equation. How do we leverage social networking to give people a sense of control? Part of that waiting. And all of a sudden you start looking at it and drawing from the experiences of my dad's illness, which I always credit as, the catalyst that really put everything in order, is we saw the frustration of cancer patients. It wasn't just my dad. It just wasn't me and my sister. It was all the other hospitals that we went to. It's all the other families that we met, and we met families from everywhere. I mean, we were in hospitals in Germany and, everywhere in the States. I mean, just everywhere. So, and when you're at these hospitals, you're meeting people from all over the world, and you wind up creating these very, very tight bonds with these people that you were in the battles with. My sister and I were constantly in different hospitals and overseas, and meeting different people from different cultures: Greece, India, Pakistan, Asia, New Zealand, Africa, South America, everywhere, and it all comes from people that got this one concept. It was like ingrained in common sense. Thee who seeks the cure is thy cure in itself. The Roman philosopher Seneca. And like, if you looked at like his like thinking, in today's myopic, evidence-based medicine world, this guy would be a quack. So, there's got to be an adherence that this is all for the benefit of raising cancer patients' quality of life. That's the most important part. And from this, what we did is we allowed a tool set to be developed, which we consider called Cure-ncy. And Cure-ncy is a social network, 15 modular best practice adaptation to the EORTC Quality of Life Index. It allows us to help cancer patients see ways that they can mobilize their friends, their family, charities, so that they can wind up going through this journey with a little more education, a lot more friends, and a lot more organized support around them. That's the intent. The intent is, we're here, we're your cheerleader, we're going to find you the best information. And we're going to find you that best information because we're a nonprofit. We're a nonprofit fueled by volunteer editors like Wikipedia, who might have a passion for a typical cancer. They might have lost a family member to, say, cholangiocarcinoma, in my case. The ability of helping other people raise their quality of life. it all comes down to that they can sponsor an acute lymphocytic leukemia or myelogenous leukemia. And, a loved one might say, you want to know something? I want to support researchers. And these can be people that are researchers that have PhDs in biotech research. And guess where they live? They might live in India. They might live in the Philippines. But you want to know something? They're incredibly smart people, and they know medical, and they know research, and they know how to build a compendium of research that doesn't cost a lot, but the value of what they're doing is priceless. And when these people are sick and they're looking to find information in a no BS advertorial manipulation of their situation, when they need to have the skinny of it, they can find a board, which is a graphical pin feed that we've engineered, which we call, our category news feed. And what we do is we present our information in a graphical representation, very similar to what Pinterest looks like. And what that does is that leads them to different types of content. And that content might be a micro social network, or what you guys would know as pages, profiles, articles, questions and answers, discussion forums, videos, events, and stores, even if there's stuff like that that's needed, all put together in a linear way that where the 15 different modules to help raise your quality of life is all about education and support and what can we do to help you. And what we do is we have a really interesting function that we built into this. So as we have our volunteer researchers and volunteers, finding the best information and, helping people with questions and answers, what we wind up doing is we have a volunteer scenario. And that volunteer scenario is really quite amazing. But what it comes down to is that I can find information. And there's the other element of Cure-ncy, which is as people are contributing content to help cancer patients figure out things as basically the go-to cancer research newsroom. We are the CNN of cancer. If you want to know the skinny on U5U clinical trials and people that have tried them, and what oncologists are against them, and what the mechanism of action through the chemical reactions. I mean, you want to dig deep, find it, have it. You want questions answered on it. You want video presentation. You want different multimedia formats. We're your go-to site. We are the CNN of cancer. But we're going one step further. And that one further step is being able to index cancer survivors' stories. And this is why it is so important. Because we have the technology and the infrastructure that Dr. Kevin Buckman and myself have been working religiously on for more years than I can remember, is what we're doing is we're figuring out ways of capturing experiences. There's that saying, that proverb, everyone's a genius in hindsight. Once again, that time span of hindsight. What if you could tap into the experience of hindsight in the timing of now to aid it in a decision that you needed to make, which had paramount consequences? Would that be something that would be a contributor to society? I believe it is, and that's the driving factor behind my passion of Cure-ncy, is we can tap survivor stories through the same methodology as the QLQ30 does with cancer patients, but instead of just 10 questions or 30 questions, we can capture it all. We can capture it all with bioinformatics, with peripherals that come into your smartphone, with permission control. I don't even have to be active about it. It's just part of something I believe in, like the SETI project. I want to become part of something that can help cancer. So why don't we start sharing our bioinformatics? So as people come into the CNN of cancer, cancer.im, and they start getting the research that they need when they need it, and now they have the ability of creating their own customized strategies based on their values, resources, and beliefs, which we call the MAP, which is a mission adaptive plan, which allows you to see information through a toolbar extension on your browser, that as you see stuff that resonates with you, whether it's on Cancer.im or other sites, you can bookmark it to your interpretation of that module, how that resonates with you. So a good example would be one of the modules is diet, and you have a bunch of stuff on diet. Let's go after trans fats, or better yet, raw juice. So someone who has beaten cancer, a survivor, has his map already published, and this is like what he did when he was sick, and it's like a pinboard. And through a badge system that we've engineered, which we call accomplishment-based navigation, we've been able to take a cancer patient through their accomplishments as a filter, and then being able to see their maps that they created. And all of a sudden, you're allowing people to now tap into their scrapbook, and that's just the base. The base now, as technology gets better and the computer programming gets better, and as people see the value of what we've engineered, as the community comes bigger and better, and people start really coming in, it's natural. What's going to wind up happening is we're going to wind up being able to collect a lot of data of a lot of people that had cancer, a lot of people that are helping people with cancer, a lot of people with cancer, and a lot of people in remission of cancer. And all of a sudden, we can call that day one. So think about this. As we stand on the verge of launching Cancer.im, which is at the 1.0 level right now, I call it 1.11. It's the CNN of cancer. And I say that in the regard that when CNN first came out, they were it. They were the intelligence source. I mean, there's stories when Ted Turner first came in, where the CIA was trying to tap into him. It's like, hey, can you help us out? You get the scoop faster than we do. So, what I'm getting at is when I say CNN of cancer is we're delivering the most impactful knowledge at the most contextually targeted time that you need it. And it's being fueled by indexing the user-generated content of cancer survivors that have been vetted and that are participating in this as a way of helping us weave the infrastructure for a project that we call Cure-ncy. So, and you have to think, day one, we have this bioinformatics net, and through a massive education process, and Phil right there saying, look, your social networking activity, from our patent that we engineered on method of measuring and giving points for social networking activity that we did in 2010, the peripherals that people are interacting with the social network, whether it's blowing into their smartphone and that data being processed at the smartphone level and that data being sent to the gateway of their Cancer.im profile or their Cure-ncy profile or whatever it's called. But what it is, it has to be a nonprofit. It has to be owned by the community. It has to adhere to the principles that we established in our white paper, The Power of Open Source Biotech. And the reason being is that we're stifling innovation at we're stifling innovation at the protection of profit. And it's a dark financial reality that the biotech should be ashamed of. I mean, let's face it, guys. The National Cancer Act. Let's benchmark you to Intel. Let's start. The #1 cancer drug in America today is Avastin. Avastin is 16 years old. I mean, debate that. Tell me why that is. When no one I've ever met would have a cell phone that's 16 years old. Wouldn't be able to carry it. Wouldn't be a cell phone. It'd be a laptop. It'd be a lug top. It would be one of those things that you carried on your back, the Panasonic, looked like the G.I. Joe calling kit. But what I'm getting at is biotech innovation has been thwarted due to the fact that their intellectual property protection mechanisms are archaic. And we've written patents on this. Dr. Buckman and I, we've written a patent converting patents into copyrights using user-generated content. And we need to use Cure-ncy for what it has its ultimate potential of doing, is breaking us out of a really bad financial model of protection of profits over the stifling of innovation. We need to break out of that. You know, no ideological, political affiliation or anything. It's just common sense that there's no reason we can't cure cancer. There's no reason. Call crazy. Call it what I just said. Label it as whatever you want to label it. But the bottom line is we can cure cancer. When I say we, I'm saying we as a people harnessing technology, but most importantly, harnessing technology with the economic incentive that the economy is driven on. And what I mean by that is direct impact, economic impact, not through programs, not through anything other than market force drivers. Money. That's what people have been trained. That is what the internet has trained these people. That is why everyone has an attention span of 12 seconds versus 30. What it all comes down to is that we have been trained. We have been trained by the bombardment of advertisement, and that's fine. That's what it is. I have no opinion on it other way. But what I do have an opinion on is this. This is how we can help get this database created by using market-driven force compensation. So here's Cure-ncy. Bitcoin, 44 million coins, finite, decentralized currency. What that means is that their treasury, their charter, is saying that they're going to issue a total of 44 million coins. And what they did is they did it through 50% the first year, 50% of that the second year, 50% of that the third year, and it keeps on going and going and going. And they hold it out until 40 years. They take it down to like when they're releasing like 300 coins a year. So what they've done is they've created what's known as the market force of scarcity, finite, not fiat. So, you know, the next question is, what's backing that currency? And the answer that's backing that currency is, you know, people are going to debate that nothing is backing it. But, you know, what you are debating is that there's a market that's being built, but the physical scenario of what is being backing of Bitcoin, in my opinion, would be the processing of Bitcoin, the miner system, the process verification, where you have thousands and thousands of processors acting in unison as a distributed computing brain, if you want to look at it. And, you know, let's bookmark the SETI project, because this, you know, kind of draws a parallel, is you wind up seeing that value of Bitcoin, although there's nothing behind it financially, there's a market, and that market is basically driven through containment of the currency through the scarcity model of limited distribution, excellent media coverage, and if the thing has any life, and I'm on the fence on it. I mean, I just know what it is, and I've seen it on both sides. But as a financial engineer, this is what I did: is you look at currencies, you look at the political risk, you look at the legal infrastructure, you look at the currency flow, you start figuring out this. It pisses off the governments because it's decentralized, but that also is what creates the bank of the internet. I think it's more of a fascination of what it represents than what it really is. And when people see that, I'm sure that it will find its pages in the books. But look at currency for a second. Cure-ncy off the Bitcoin model. Cure-ncy would be a clearing mechanism of all social networking, bioinformatic capture points. I'm talking that this is in a self-created entity with a Congress, with elected people that are representing a purpose. They're representing what is Cure-ncy. And most importantly, so it just has the utmost of transparency and integrity, and a charter that everyone is inspired by because everyone is empowered by it, and that's why they're on it. Because it really serves as a fulcrum to allow us to understand that we can do so much more when we decide that we're going to tackle a cause than when we look at things to separate us. Accept. I mean, our project was written by the most amazing people from every single culture. And the reason being, because we all had one goal. We wanted to take out cancer. We want to help the cancer patient raise their quality of life. We know that has the most direct impact that I've ever seen. So everyone's always wanted to be a superhero when they're a little kid. So what does a superhero want to do? What separates the superhero? Superhero values currency of life. That's what we're doing. And everyone that ties into our cancer project understands that it's open, it's direct impact, and we're helping people always. And this thing plays out 20 years to winding up being a very powerful tool in help guiding bioinformatic data as being the way of the benchmark, or the way of trying to figure out where to allocate resources for research and development. So Cure-ncy, the internet framework for the eradication of disease, is one, open source. You got to create a transparent organization. Transparent organization is owned by the people. It's the one mission is to harness the power of the bioinformatics as a collective, as people, to use it to eradicate disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all of it. And I'll explain why and how we get there. Cure-ncy gives points, Cure-ncy units, for exchange for people's social network bioinformatics. So maybe it's an app that's on the iPhone, and that app, through the new iBud technology, has a sensor in the ear, and it can measure different levels, and you have the ability of buying the peripheral for $29 that if you blow in it, we can check your oxidative stress level, intercellular acidosis, and cortisol levels. and that's today. What about 10 years from now? You'll be able to, put your earbuds in and have everything analyzed in 5 seconds. Well, that bioinformatic portfolio, we need to start day one. We need to have day one, which is the framework. And the framework is the clearing mechanism that people are getting consideration for giving their bioinformatics to a collective. And that bioinformatics is going to have a quality of life layer and all other different database dissection and figuring it out. So as the information flows, comes in, we have a dynamic capture of it. No more linear capture, all dynamic. So, I mean, this is going to create just a massive storage database of content, all dynamic, all dynamic. You establish that where they're getting points. Now, what winds up happening is Cure-ncy takes the Bitcoin model. Let's say we go 44 million coins, but instead of Bitcoin, whereas they're decentralized, Cure-ncy would be centralized, being issued by a nonprofit. Well, that's great, but what's the value of that nonprofit or that Congress or the NGO or whatever it is, whatever organization adopts it that's pure? What it comes down to is the NGO that comes in and issues virtual currency, they actually could have a reserve. And you ask yourself, what is the reserve? The reserve is that body of knowledge. Now, this is why it's so critical to establish the structure and the purity and the integrity of this structure. Is you have the clearing mechanism of how biotech companies are going to want to license this information as you become the gatekeeper of millions and millions and millions of dynamic impressions of bioinformatic database. This cube, this dynamic breathing cube of information is going to be the stars of tomorrow. It's so if you look at it, those are the stars, the information that we're gathering through the millions of people and their millions of dynamic interactions that they're having, every month. If you think about it, we could wind up capturing millions and millions and millions of bits of information a minute. I mean, look at the size of that information, and you start seeing something that kind of resembles the radio telescopes out in the desert. So now you start asking yourself a question. That database, it's going to be worth so much to research. And the answer is, yeah, it is. And this is how research plays with it. They give a royalty for the use of the data, and they have to contribute everything that they learn back into the pile. And for that, we wind up giving them a market value consideration that they can pro forma and use it for once as a tool that allows the lambda, the delta, the risk of a biotech deal, why biotech deals with revenue-immune industries, and why they trade at astronomical PE ratios, even if there is a PE ratio, meaning that how many of them turn a profit. So you look at that and you look at the analysis of how they're valued, and you say to yourself, this database will have the ability of taking that speculation out of the market. You could actually financially engineer the risk out. And the way that you can engineer the risk out with that instrument would lie in the following. Number one, what you'd be able to do is through the royalty system, you would be able to amortize R&D. So now all of a sudden, you start looking at medicine as being bioinformatics, supercomputing, protein folding, enzyme catalyst tracking. You're getting into the molecular biology. And where is molecular biology? Where is the playground in the molecular biology revolution? And the molecular biology revolution, it's going to lie as physics being the dominant science, because they're the ones who own physics. They're the ones who know how to split atoms, while biochemistry only knows how to split wood, meaning that we're introducing chemicals into the body to elicit a physics response or a physiological response at the cellular level, and we do not know the mechanism of action. It's a hypothesis. Don't take my word for it. It's on every FDA label that you'll ever read. It's the disclosure language that they have to present to the commissioners. Although the mechanism of action is unknown, the following effects have been observed and recorded. We do not know the mechanism of action because we're introducing a chemical to produce a physiological response, and we're basically taking stats on it. So although Kobe Bryant scored 32 points today and had 11 rebounds, we had no idea how he got home. And I have absolutely no idea why this guy is so frustrated because he bet against the Lakers. We don't know why this guy's jumping up and down because he bet against the other team. What it all gets down to, those are the interactions. And the reason why we don't even understand the reaction, the interactions are these side effects. We don't even have a clue. And yet, we start looking at, maybe that might be the reason why adverse drug reaction is the fourth leading cause of death. There might be something called overkill, no pun intended. But what it really brings into the picture is we need to have a framework that will sustain the biotech of what we're doing, this Cure-ncy issue. So what winds up happening with Cure-ncy is now, in order for biotech companies to play with us, Cure-ncy, they have to adhere to being, one, open source. They have to adhere to, number two, that any research that they get, they share. And what winds up happening is they give a royalty for the infrastructure, and we wind up probably giving them a great deal on the processing, which we also can bring in, which will be explained. And what winds up happening is we're really the biotech information component of the molecular biology revolution. We're the ones that are curating the data. We're the ones that are allowing the financial transactions to happen because we created not only the streamlined collection of bioinformatics, which is the Cure-ncy project through Cancer-IM and Dr. Buckman's volatile organic compound breath test with NASA and so forth. But what it also comes down to is we have the ability of making this a market-driven instrument. And what I mean by this is you now have Cure-ncy, you have flow of it, and people are giving you their information in return for fractional ownership of Cure-ncy, which could have value. And the value that would be derived would come from licensing agreements from technology companies that came in. So let's say that we have this huge body of knowledge, and we have 10 biotech companies come in, and they're developing drugs the first year, and it creates $100 million in revenue. And let's say 10 years from now, the body of knowledge is X, and it's creating $20 billion in revenue. And let's say that the next year it's doing X, and it's creating just an incredible amount of revenue because of the value of the bioinformatics. That is being passed through directly through this Cure-ncy, which would support the currency from being non-fiat. And being that it'd be non-fiat is that A, it would be accountable being that it would be centralized. It'd be issued by, either an insulated charity with transparent Congress, or an NGO, or something like UNICEF or World Health Organization, where you have a commissioning body that would allow the issuance of that decentralized currency. With the backing of that decentralized currency, this body of knowledge that was codified through the terms of service of how it initially got people to this charter of 100% transparency, 100% science research, 100% no bureaucracy, 100% just let the people incubate the technology. It has to be 100% open source. Has to be. There's no way that we can allow financial interest to get in the way of innovation at this molecular biological revolution that we're about to see, where physics is going to become the dominant life science over chemistry at the intersection of bioinformatics. We have the ability of using Cure-ncy as the market-driven instrument to collect that bioinformatic data, as well as create a market-driven instrument to allow it to propagate for the sake of allowing this to become the world's largest collector of bioinformatics. And in doing so, what do we have? So we're issuing coins for this body of knowledge, and we're retaining coins. And that comes into the second part of Cure-ncy. It is estimated that there's over 5 billion cell phones. So I'm going to talk about Cure-ncy and its processing power, part 2. Cure-ncy's second component is a component that is known as the processing component. In today's society, we have over 5 billion cell phones.